If we're talking about the war on terror and the indoctrination of college students, we need to talk about Noam Chomsky, who is, and this book that Peter and I have done is long overdue.
Why do you call it long overdue?
Well, Chomsky has been spreading his poisons for about 40 years, actually. And this is the first book that takes on Chomsky's act, as it were. Noam Chomsky is the most influential intellectual in the academic world. I believe
you say there's a cult out there. You call
it is a well, of course, it's a cult. He's promoted by Rage Against the Machine and Pearl Jam play his incredibly boring speeches at their rock concerts. He was celebrated in the film Good Will Hunting, which I have to say was one of the most dreadful films I have ever been in a theater to witness. I don't say this because of its politics. It was just dreadful. But in the middle of that, the genius, I think it's played by Matt Damon, who is a neighbor of Chomsky's and a Chomskyite, refers to him as a genius. He is more cited than anybody in human history. He's, I think, the 7th most cited author in academic life after Plato and Freud. He has a reputation as a linguist. He has a theory of linguistics, which we deal with in the book. What you have to understand about Noam Chomsky is that he is a colossal, compulsive, certifiable liar. That Mary McCarthy once said, he is actually the intellectual is Michael Moore. Mary McCarthy once said of Lillian Hellman that everything she wrote was a lie, including the words and the. And the same could be said of Chomsky. Not only, I mean, one of the more amusing episodes and jaw-dropping episodes in this book that Peter Collier and I have edited, and which is available at frontpagemag.com or Amazon, of course, is a New Yorker piece appeared it was April 2003, and it was a profile of Chomsky, and in it the author described a class that Chomsky taught at MIT, where he, as is normal for Chomsky, said, tried to portray the United States as worse than Nazi Germany, and said that the British and the Americans had supported Nazi troops who were attacking the Russians and thereby helped the Holocaust to happen. That was the implications of his statement. And of course, there's absolutely no such, this never happened. And the writer of this piece in our book wrote to Chomsky and pointed out that there's just no evidence. He asked Chomsky first what his source was. Chomsky gave him the source, and the source said nothing of the kind. So Chomsky's response was that the New Yorker made up, he never said that, and the New Yorker writer made it all up. It was a total fabrication, which is a common Chomsky phrase. So John Williamson, who wrote the piece in our book, The Anti-Chomsky Reader, called up Larissa McFarquhar, who was the New Yorker writer, and said, Chomsky says it's a fabrication. And she said, well, actually, it's on tape. MIT taped the class, and you can get the tape. And he got the tape, and everything that she had said, every word was there. So, and this is not the only case in this. Chomsky also, right after 9/11, when the United States went to war with the Taliban, claimed to an audience of 2,000 at MIT, and it was a C-SPAN speech, he said the United States is planning, or here's what he said. He said, it looks like the United States is planning a silent genocide of about 3 to 4 million people in Afghanistan. And the claim was that we were going to starve them. There was already a famine in the waiting, and the United States was going to bomb the supply trucks and starve 3 to 4 million Afghan citizens. The facts were, even when Chomsky said that, the United States had undertaken a massive special food supply to the Afghan people. And whereas people were going to starve before 9/11, just because conditions were so bad in Afghanistan, the United States, in the midst of a war, airlifted and got in $300 million worth of food and prevented any starvation from taking place. This did not stop Chomsky. Chomsky went to Pakistan and India in the midst of the war in Afghanistan. Now, Pakistan, of course, is a Muslim country. And on the front pages of those papers, you could see the American professor denouncing America as the greatest terrorist state in the world and claiming that the Americans were planning the genocide of 3 to 4 million Afghans. After the war was over, after nobody had starved, because the Americans had sent in food, Chomsky was asked by a British leftist paper, The Independent, about what he had said. I mean, what do you think now about the genocide you predicted? And Chomsky said that's a complete fabrication. Now it's on C-SPAN, what he said. This is all in our book, The Anti-Chomsky Reader, which is just out and should be in the hands of every college student that has to encounter a Chomsky argument.
Ithaca, New York. Horowitz is the editor of this new book. It's called The Anti-Chomsky Reader. Is it in bookstores yet?
The Anti-Chomsky Reader is in bookstores everywhere. As I say, it's a kind of a survival handbook for college students.
What were you trying to do with this picture?
Not only, well, it's a negative, so unlike people like Chomsky, we, being conservatives, say exactly what we mean. This is a book. This is the antidote to the poisons that Noam Chomsky has put out there. As I say, he is a world-class, compulsive liar. There isn't a word in this that he writes that you can trust on its own. You have to look everything up. And this is, of course, an education in the themes of our times. Chomsky is a Holocaust supporter of Holocaust deniers. He is was an apologist for Pol Pot, who was responsible for the Cambodian genocide. He is a hater of Israel. He's a hater of America. And reading this book will give you a kind of education in the kind of main themes of the time, including the war on terror. Yosemite.
Royal Oak, Michigan, Democrat.
Good morning, and thank you for accepting my call. I would like to thank your guest, and I appreciate his participation this morning, and thank him for bringing Noam Chomsky on national TV, because I think Noam Chomsky has been undermined and not been given enough attention. I've never heard of your guest before, but I understand that he has a great hate for Noam Chomsky. And that's a guess that he's a far-right, maybe even third-right, Nazi, Zionist. Please respond to these accusations, but Noam Chomsky's an intellectual. He's not even left.
Caller, I'm gonna let you go because the name calling is not really appropriate
let me just
here.
Point out how amusing this is now. And Noam Chomsky, as I said, is the most cited intellectual. I mean, this is a sad comment on the academic world, but the most cited intellectual in academia. His musings, he wrote a book called, well, he didn't write a book. He talked a few pages on 9/11. It's a thin little book of interviews. Sold 200,000 copies. He is interviewed regularly in the New York Times. He had a 3-hour in-depth interview on C-SPAN. And actually, I just talked to Brian Land. It was very difficult to get Chomsky into the studio. He doesn't like to be invited because he likes to complain that nobody pays attention to him. When he speaks thousands of people go to see him speak. He's all over the place. As I said, the two huge bands, Pearl Jam and Rage Against the Machine, a major, an Academy Award-winning motion picture, celebrated him as a genius, and this scholar says that nobody's paying any attention to him. People are paying way too much attention to Noam Chomsky. This is, anyway.
Did you talk to Noam Chomsky when you wrote this book?
No, I knew Noam back when I was a radical, and he could not handle the slightest criticism even then. So I know he actually. It's very interesting because I wrote a piece about him called "The Ayatollah of Anti-American Hate," and his response to that was that he never read anything that I wrote either when I was a leftist. He didn't read anything I wrote when I was a leftist or now, and I had to point out that he had quoted me in one of his books, my writings as a leftist. So he lied about that too. As I say, he's a compulsive liar. No, there was no need to lie about that, but he can't help himself.
Which book is this for you? What number?
Oh, I have no idea. But I have no idea. I've written about, I had to make up for a lot of lost time. I didn't, my first book as a conservative came out in 1989. It was called Destructive Generation. And that was followed by my autobiography, Radical Son. And since then, I've written 6 or 7 books. I have two of the chapters in the Anti-Chomsky Reader, one with my friend Ron Radosh on Chomsky and the War on Terror. The other is Chomsky's anti-American obsession. He is an obsessive thinker. For example, in the New Yorker interview, which I mentioned earlier, he has to go out of his way. Since 9/11, many people compare to Pearl Harbor. He says that Pearl Harbor was a good thing. Why was Pearl Harbor a good thing? Because it expelled the United States from, it was the Japanese, the third world peoples striking back at the United States. Of course, Japan was a monstrous empire, which committed atrocity, some of the worst war atrocities on record all throughout Asia. And the United States, this was the good war, but for Noam Chomsky, there can be no good war that America fights, because it's America.
This is published by Encounter Books, which you started.
No, my partner, Peter Collier, who is the co-editor of this book and wrote the introduction, is the founding publisher of Encounter Books, which is a wonderful publishing company producing many, many quality titles.
David Horowitz, thanks for joining us. The name of the book is The Anti-Chomsky Reader. The editors Peter Collier and David Horowitz. Well, we're now going to go back.